Hi, welcome to DrumWise Meets. Today, I'm here with a drummer who's worked with the likes of Vertical Horizon, Button, and he is the drummer for the Doobie Brothers. This is DrumWise Meets Ed Toth. Hi, Ed.
How you doing?
My first question for you today, Ed, what age did you get into drums? And when you first started playing, what bands or artists inspired you?
I grew up in a very musical household. My dad was a guitar player, is a guitar player still, but he was a full-time musician when I was born. He held down a jazz gig in beautiful New London, Connecticut. And he did that gig 5 nights a week for like 7 years. And so there was music all over the house all the time. And I really just gravitated towards it. Drums, I'm not really sure why drums. I started banging on things, and I would eventually that graduated to, mom's wooden spoons with pots and pans. And I think my dad noticed this. And, so he got, I think I had a toy drum set at first, which I properly destroyed, like Keith Moon style. And he got me enrolled in some lessons at a local music store around the time I was 6 years old. But I remember music as far back as, when I was 2 years old. I had a toy record player, and I used to grab my father's records and play them on the toy record player to the point that he didn't want me ruining his vinyl. So he just showed me how to properly use his stereo. And music wise, I mean, this would have been a complete variety of stuff. The old man was really into the California thing in the 70s. So that would have been, of course, the Doobie Brothers that's where I first heard the Doobie Brothers. Crosby, Stills, Nash, the Eagles, Linda Ronstadt. But he also loved classic R&B music. He was a big fan of the band Rufus with Shaka Khan, Stevie Wonder. Tower of Power was a really big deal in my house when I was a kid. And then he was a jazz nut because he was doing a jazz gig. So of course, him being a guitar player, we had a lot of Wes Montgomery going on in the house. He's a big Jimmy Smith fan. So later on, as we got older, we both really got into Pat Metheny, in the Pat Metheny group right about the time I was 10 years old or so. So it was really cool to have this sort of constant rotation of different kinds of music going on in my house, really from the time I was born.
Excellent. And a question relating to when you first started, what was your first drum set?
My first drum set was I don't even know what the brand was. I had just been playing it on on a pad at that point, and we had driven by like a neighborhood yard sale, and I spied some drums and sort of begged my parents, like, can you go buy those drums for me? And they went and checked it out, and it was affordable, so they bought them. And it was a kick drum that had a small cymbal attached to it. I'm not sure the cymbal could have been bigger than 14 inches. Looking back, it may have been a hi-hat cymbal that was just attached to the top attachment of this kick drum, and there was a snare drum as well. So that was it. So my friend, we didn't even have a seat. I took one of the seats from our dining room table and used that as my throne. But somewhere I have a recording of my father helping me with a drum lesson on this little kit, which is wild. From there, he bought me the drummer he was working with was getting rid of some drums, and I ended up getting a Slingerland Blue Sparkle. This was a kick drum with a mounted tom. It had a sort of a ride cymbal mounted to it, snare drum, and a hi-hat. So now I had a hi-hat. So now I could kind of groove along with stuff. I had one tom-tom, so I could play some fills on the one tom-tom, and I had a cymbal that I could crash or play real basic ride patterns on. And I would have been probably about 8 years old when I got this particular kit.
Oh, great. And my next question with that is, do you still have either of those kits, the first one or the Slingerland?
I don't, and I wish I did. And after that came another kick drum with a cymbal attachment, snare drum combination, and hi hat at a better hi hat stand. And these were Ludwig's.
Mm.
And this snare drum on this was one of those small, I think it was 4x14. It was like an early sort of piccolo drum, and it had the one lug casing where the bottom lug went in one side and the top lug went in the other side. And these drums are worth like, $1,000 now. And of course, when I was a senior in high school, I bought a Tama Swing Star kit. Now this was great because there was like 4 toms and a floor tom and 3 rototoms, so I could play along with Rush records, right? I gave away my hybrid Ludwig Slingerland because I put the 2 kits together, as you do, right? I gave that away to a family friend who's had a son that was playing and didn't have any drums.
Ah.
Gave it to him, and now I'm just like, oh, man, what I wouldn't do to have those drums. I still have the Tama kit though.
Oh, cool. Well, that's good.
Yeah.
Excellent. Yeah, we all have those bits of equipment that we're like, oh, why did I sell that? Like,
Absolutely. I've got a Ludwig Superphonic olive badge that a drummer friend of mine sold me, probably 10 or 12 years ago. And once every 6 months, I get a text from him like he wants it back, basically.
and you're like, no way.
Like I don't think so, man.
Now, you mentioned Rush there, so that may have been a bit of a hint into the answer to this next question, maybe. I'm going to make the question really difficult to begin with.
Okay.
And now I'll open it up again at the end. So if you had to pick just one, who would be your all-time favorite drummer?
Oh man. That's so hard because I really look at music as the whole. My thinking about music is not very drum centric, and never really has been. Although, of course, when you're a kid and you're drawing, Neil and Stewart's drum sets on a notebook pad, it is very drum centric. But as I kind of got more into it and started playing more and growing as a musician, it became much more about the music and less about sort of what the drummer was doing. That being said, if I have to pick a guy, it's probably going to be Stuart Copeland.
Right.
Because he, I played along with a lot of my dad's records, the Doobies, the Frampton Comes Alive, Fleetwood Mac Rumors, kind of real basic stuff. I mean, it was a really good day when I learned that I could play Swingtown by Steve Miller Band, because that's got a really busy kind of kick drum pattern and, is funky in its own way. But Stewart, I mean, MTV started happening. So now all of a sudden you could see drummers. Because before that, it was, my old man waking me up to see Buddy Rich on The Tonight Show. And then later on, of course, we got a VCR. We were able to tape some things, but you didn't see drummers. There wasn't a drum magazine. There wasn't drummers on TV. You had to go to concerts to actually see drummers, which thank goodness my parents took me to shows starting around the time I was 8 years old or so. Actually, my first concert, I was 5. I remember a little bit about it. It was Tower of Power in 74. And then Doobie shows, that kind of thing. Pat Metheny Group. And then I started going to my own shows, which of course was Rush every year, Genesis. And then I went through a period where I would go see everybody. But to bring it back to what we're talking about, seeing Stewart on TV, he looked so bitchin' with like the traditional grip. He was a good looking guy. He was muscular. He almost kind of beat the crap out of his drums. And there was something about that was like, coupled with what you were hearing from it, was a big deal. The other big deal about Stewart that I don't think a lot of people talk about is you think about like a record like Zenyatta Mondatta, where his drums really kind of opened up, very ringy toms, a lot more splashes. He got the octabands in at that point. Before that, the drums were still 70s, like cardboard box sounding,
Mm.
open-headed toms with gaff tape all over them. Really just kind of sounded like crap. Um, with some charm, of course. Now everybody seems to want to go back to that, which is a little mind blowing. But here was a guy who sounded like nobody else. He had his own sound, the reggae thing, and you could see him every day if you caught the Every Little Thing She Does Is Magic video on MTV.
Mm.
And so that was really a big. And then I saw them live in '84, and it was just like, he was my Ringo. Stewart was my Ringo.
Cool.
Yeah.
And I agree. That's a really hard one to answer because we draw on lots of different influences as we get older and as we grow as musicians, don't we? But if I was to open it up now and say, what are your other influences? Who are your other influences?
Well, drum specific wise, I mean, I go back to all those early recordings. So David Garibaldi is a big deal. All the drummers who were in the Doobies, because I loved those records. I love playing along to those records. Some of those drum tracks are absolutely phenomenal. I mean, a lot of drummers don't kind of go there because when you think of the Doobie Brothers, you sort of think of some of those guitar anthems, and then you think about like Michael McDonald's voice,
Mm.
and it's like, okay, well, there's some album tracks, and I mean, even the groove to Taking It to the Streets is like, come on, man, like that's classic Keith Knudsen. I mean, just absolutely fits musically with what's going on. Is really a really oddball groove for a top four, what is essentially a top 40 song. Um, and then moving on, of course, Neil Peart, Phil Collins, the aforementioned Stewart, Vinnie Colaiuta, Gadd, and then when I really started getting into swing, like Elvin's my guy there. Big Philly Joe Jones fan. Um, Ed Thigpen with brush stuff on these Oscar Peterson records that my dad used to play all the time. Um, I mean, I could go on. I could go on and on and on. Manu Katché, when he came onto the scene, I wanted to own every record that he was on, and of course the stuff with Peter is great. But then he played some amazing stuff on Robbie Robertson's first solo record. Um, he's on the Tears for Fears Seeds of Love record, which is one of my favorite records. Song on that record called Bad Man's Song, like some of the greatest drumming you'll hear. So but then I also like the White Stripes. I mean, it's not just the technical whatever. Like I like a vibe. I like a feel and a vibe and that kind of thing. So as long as I'm getting that from the music, it goes back to what we were saying about sort of music as a whole. As long as the drummer's serving his function and whatever that is, my antenna goes up.
Yeah. Excellent. Now, another one that people have found a bit of a tough one. What's been the highlight of your career so far?
Ooh, that is a tough one. Just playing in this band is really a highlight. Playing in the Doobie Brothers, because I was a fan when I was a kid. I think 77, 78 was the first time I saw them in concert, and these were also sort of some of my first concert experiences. And I wrote a letter to their fan club when I was 11 years old, and got back this form letter like, "Dear fan, you want to buy a T-shirt?" And like, order form for a T-shirt. It was like, what a disappointment. I poured my heart out to you. I invited you over to the house for dinner, and you're sending me a form letter. I get to tease them about that now, which is nice. But yeah, just the fact that I've been in this band is really a little bit mind blowing. Um, in Vertical Horizon, we had a number one song, like a Hot 100 number one song for a couple of weeks that was played all over the radio in early 2000s. I mean, that's a nice thing. I still hear that music here and there, which is pretty cool. And it's like there have been a couple of occasions where I've sort of heard something in the background, and it's like, oh, this sounds kind of familiar. Oh, the drummer's like really good. And I'm like, oh shit, it's me. You know, it's like almost embarrassed for digging it, you know. Um, but yeah, I mean, those are highlights. You know, of course, the hometown gig, returning to your hometown as a you know with a hit is kind of a cool thing, and just little things like that. I mean, ultimately, I think we're fortunate enough to just be able to do this for a living.
Mm.
I mean, that's all I wanted to do when I was a kid. It was like, you know what, I want to play music for a living. And man, I haven't held down a quote unquote proper job since I was 24 years old, 25 years old. So, and I'm 51 now. So, I mean, I've spent half my life doing what I wanted to do when I was a kid. I mean, not a lot of people can say that. So that's really kind of a big deal for me.
Yeah, that's really cool. And actually, hold that thought because we're going to kind of come back to that
Sure.
shortly with one of my questions. Now, with career highlights out of the way, what about maybe some sort of the other end of the scale with maybe some fails? So, have you ever have you ever had anything go wrong on stage that you've had to recover from, whether it's a brain fail or a gear fail?
Yeah, I've had a couple of things go wrong. You know, there's always the occasional brain fail. You know, you sort of take off doing a run down the toms and it's going real great, and then you realize like you want to come down to hit that big one, but you still have a couple more eighth notes to go. You know, that hasn't happened in a while, thank goodness. I think experience and wisdom takes over there. But yeah, I've shredded. I used to shred. I don't do it anymore, but there were a couple of occasions where I was shredding the metal on my bass drum beater towards the bottom because I would have it up kind of high up in the pedal, like right sort of at the bottom. And I was tightening it down too much. And so the metal would just sort of shred and the bass drum beater would kind of go flying in the middle of a tune and you've got no kick drum. So now you're doing this thing where like you're trying to play the kick drum pattern on a floor tom, you're playing open handed, you know, and I play traditional, so I'm trying to make sure I'm getting the right angle of the hi-hat with my left hand and trying to do the kick drum. And meanwhile, you're looking over at your guy doing the spinal tap thing, going, you know, I need you to come over here, you know, get a bass drum beater and put it on. So that happened twice in the Vertical Horizon days until I realized what the problem was and fixed the problem. And then this is classic, man. I was doing it was probably the biggest hometown gig that I did with Vertical Horizon. We were playing at a place called the Oakdale Theater in Connecticut. My guest list was like, I think I had to buy tickets that night because we went over our allotted stuff. I had all kinds of family there. My grandparents were there. It was just really cool. Well, we go out for the encore, and there's a couple of steps up to the drum riser. And I'm totally caught up in the moment. I'm like waving and I kind of have like my section of people and I'm just kind of waving. I trip on the step, man, and just right down on top of the drum riser on all fours, you know. I did what anybody does in that situation. I got up gracefully. I kind of went like this. I bowed. I sat down and we finished the show. So,
Awesome.
yeah.
When you first get a gig with a new artist, how do you learn the material? So, I mean, I suppose Doobie Brothers is a great example of that. You know, when you first got that gig, how did you learn all the stuff that you were going to have to play? So, you know, did you just listen? Did you transcribe? Or did they go, here you go, Ed, like, here's a whole folder with all of the drum music written out for you?
No, it wasn't like that at all. So what happened was they had sent me when I got the call for the audition. Um, it was still two drummers at that time. Um, and the other drummer in the band was Michael Hossack, who was one of the original guys. He played on Listen to the Music, China Grove, Long Train Run, and Blackwater, like all that stuff. Um, and Mike, as it turns out, was a Vertical Horizon fan, and he had come out to see us, and we met at a show, and so we became friends. Um, and I had sort of invited them out. I found out that our booking agency was the same as theirs. So I called my agent and I said, "Hey, we're playing at the Warfield Theater in San Francisco. I'm a huge Doobie fan. I just realized that you guys represent them. Can you invite like all those guys out?" I didn't even know if they still lived in the Bay Area, California. No idea. Well, Mike and their manager, Bruce, ended up coming out to that gig. It was a really kind of odd gig. Phil Lesh from the Grateful Dead had come out that night as well. And I'm like, what's Phil Lesh doing here? We're sort of like a pop rock, top 40 band, and he's in the Dead. Like, and then I thought, you know what? I like all kinds of music. Why wouldn't Phil Lesh like all kinds of music? I mean, if I could go to a Carpenters concert, I'd go
Yeah.
just to hear her sing, let alone watch her play the drums. So that was kind of a cool night, and Mike and I became friends. So when the gig became open and there was going to be an audition, it was an invite audition only. It wasn't like a cattle call or anything like that. So he said he knew that I hadn't left Vertical Horizon yet, but that's where my head was at. And he knew this, being my friend, and he said, "You want to come down and play?" And I'm like, "Of course I want to come down and play." And I thought nothing of it. I'm like, this will be great. I'll go to California on their dime, which was pretty cool, and I'll be in the Doobies for a half hour, and if it's not too weird, maybe I'll ask for a photo, and then that'll be that, because there were some name guys on the audition and that were friends of theirs and all that. And I'm 20 years younger than them. And I just thought, there's no way. So what it was they sent me a list of about, I think it was 5 or 6 tunes. I still have it around somewhere. And it was all, the arrangements were all from a live album that they had just put out called Live at Wolf Trap. And that was essentially like, learn these tunes and you'll come in and play with these tunes and that'll be it. And we've got like 7 other guys we need to listen to, and we'll, don't call us, we'll call you type kind of situation. So as far as knowing the material goes, I mean, I had played along with these records as a kid. My dad used to record, if a radio station did a live broadcast, my dad would record them. So I had some of these live shows and I would play along to these gigs from top to bottom. And when they introduced one of the drummers, I, all by myself in my basement, would stand up and wave, like practice my audience greeting and that kind of thing. So, I mean, I was way into it. So I knew all this material. What I did do was not only did I take the uh, songs on their list from that live record, I went ahead and learned the whole live record, the whole thing. So that way, if something popped up, or if they said, "Is there anything that you want to do, or any questions you have?" I could be like, "Yeah, could we play such and such?" In fact, at one point, Tom Johnston called out a song to play, and McPhee stopped him. John McPhee stopped him and said, "Hey, that song's not on the list." And I was like, "Dude, it's all right. I know it. Let's play it." So something like that was in my benefit. And then also, I mean, I feel like I should say this for anybody that might be listening. Um, I kind of take an audition process. You're not going to not be nervous in an audition. So I think the way to kind of flip that on its head is to go in and say, "Okay, you know what? Have a little bit of attitude. Like, all right, MFers, like, I'm auditioning you. Do I want to play with you guys? Is this a place that I want to sit night after night?" Um, Totally crazy, arrogant way to think of it, but at the same time, it helps steel those nerves a little bit. So you can just kind of go in and play. And at this point, also, it's like, you know what, man, I'm just walking in a room and playing music with other musicians. It
Hmm.
doesn't matter what they've done. I mean, I could walk into a room with Geddy Lee and Alex Lifeson and be like, "All right, man, let's go." You
Hmm.
know, I know these songs. It's cool to play with you guys. You're great musicians. Let's get to the work at hand. And then later, just kind of pinch yourself and just go, "Holy crap! I just played with the Doobie Brothers."
Yeah, yeah.
And then I got the gig, which I wasn't really expecting. So I just looked at that whole process as like a fun adventure.
Mm.
And if anything went beyond that rehearsal room that day, then great. And if not, holy crap, I got to play China Grove and listen to the music. All these songs I'd played in bars growing up, I got to play them with those dudes.
Yeah.
But now it's been 16 years, so
Yeah, that's cool. So with the Doobie Brothers, when you sort of first joined, how did you find it with the whole two drummer thing? I mean, was
oh
it
sure.
something that you had to really get used to?
Well, yes and no. No, because I'd done a lot of marching stuff growing up. My high school marching band was a very competitive, very successful band in the northeastern United States, and I marched the year of drum corps with a group out of Jersey called the Bridgemen. And I was 15 when I did that, and I thought I was a rock star. I thought I had it made, man. I was paying to travel across the country in like a Greyhound bus with a bunch of other people, and do a marching show every night in the summer heat, and it was glorious.
Mm.
I don't know how my mom ever let me just go off on a bus around the country at 15 years old. No, this is 1985. No cell phones, no internet. You know, I'd be calling her up, getting her to wire me money. Like, Mom, I'm out of money. Can you wire me $50? Um, it was absolutely crazy. I did it for a year, and I loved it. And I did drumline at university. I went to the University of Miami in Florida to their music school there, and I did marching band there for a couple of the years that I was there. So there is that listening thing of playing along with another drummer and trying to sound like one.
Mm.
Um, you know, two drummers in the Doobies wasn't like two drummers in the Dead or the Almonds. Like Butch Trucks and the Almonds always seem to kind of hold it down. Well, JMO did his Elvin thing and decorated, and I think Mickey Hart and Billy Kreutzmann had a similar kind of thing going on in the Dead. Um, and it's not like the three drummers in Crimson. Like, it wasn't anything like that. We're basically playing the same groove together.
Mm.
So it's really just a matter of listening. Mike and I would communicate about, like, sometimes we'd do a similar fill together. Other times it would be like, you take that fill, I'll take this fill, and you just kind of lay off.
Mm.
Either lay off completely and come back in on the one, or maybe play some time on a ride cymbal or a hi hat while somebody was going off. And it's Doobie Brothers music, so these fills were never more than a bar long, at tops. Um, and I had a little bit of an advantage going into the audition, I think, because Mike and I were friends, so I was able to call him up and say, "Hey, I'm listening to the music. Like, what should we do at this point here?" So I kind of mapped out at least the tunes that were on their list, mapped out with him how he wanted to do it. One of the tunes was a blues shuffle, and I was like, "You sure you just don't want to play this by yourself? I mean, a shuffle is such an individual thing. Do you put it on the front? Do you put it on the back? Do you put it straight on? Like, what are the guitar players doing? How are they? Are they pushing it a little? If they're pushing it a little bit, maybe I should lay it back a little bit. Like,
Mm.
that kind of thing." And I remember him asking about that, like what kind of shuffle am I doing here? Am I just, playing the shuffle pattern with the 2 and 4? Am I doing it sort of what they call like Texas style, like where I'm filling da 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 with my left hand?
Mm.
Um, and so I was able to ask Mike those things and communicate those things, because I didn't want him to be doing just a huge backbeat 2/4 shuffle while I was just kind of trying to make it a little more greasy.
Mm.
Um, and he actually told me after I had gotten the gig, he said, I can't remember if it was 6 people or 8 people that auditioned for the gig, but he said to me, he said, half of those guys had my number and knew how to get a hold of me. He said, you're the only guy that called me. He's like, don't you think if you were going to audition for a gig that involved another drummer, you would at least, even if you didn't have a number, you'd at least call the office and say, hey, can you put me in touch with Mike Hosek so I can ask him some questions about the gig? I mean, so I'm glad I did.
Mm. Now, earlier on, I said we'd come back to this. You talked about being, being fortunate that we can do something that we love and basically get paid for it, and have it as a career. And
Hmm.
that's kind of where this question's come from. There's a couple of curveball questions now, starting with this one. What are your hobbies away from drums?
Um, that's a great question. Um, I read a lot, various. I've always got a book or two going at the same time. Usually, maybe a fiction and then a nonfiction, just so I don't forget stuff. Um, this last year, of course, unfortunately, there's been a lot of TV watching. Um, but I'm fascinated with colonial America. I read a lot of books about that. I try to visit local, like historical societies when I'm on tour. If I have a day off, I go to museums and try to learn a bit more about where I am. If I have a day off in Charlotte, North Carolina, it's like, well, I'll start like with Wikipedia and just sort of like, okay, what's the story with Charlotte, North Carolina? Just learning a little bit more about sort of where you are in the world, I think, is a cool thing. Um, the colonial American thing, I'm not sure where that came from. I just, ever since I was a kid, I was just fascinated by the idea um, of people saying, this isn't for us. We're going to go over here and do it that way. Um, of course, they whitewash a lot of the stuff because we eventually came over here and killed a lot of people and took their land and all that. But I think it's absolutely fascinating that a bunch of sort of 30 something drunks like said we're going to start a country.
Mm.
We're going to do things this way. And I was just in Boston a couple of weeks ago with my daughter, and it's such a great place to go for that kind of stuff. And so that's a real fascination with me, and I could actually see myself in sort of later years working more in that area. Um, so we'll see. Now I live in Eastern Pennsylvania, and there's a lot of that here as well, being so close to Philadelphia, which a lot of people don't know. Almost it practically became the capital of the United States. So I'm really into that. I don't keep any bees, but I'm kind of fascinated with bees and beekeeping and what they actually do
Mm.
for the planet, and just their actual job in life
Yeah.
is really interesting to me. Um, so yeah, I love a good film. I also love a crap film. I mean, if Eddie and the Cruisers is on TV, I'm watching it. So
Cool. And the whole point of that question, this is what I was
sure.
getting to before I asked it. What you said about, our something that we love doing becoming our career. That's exactly where that question came from, because it would have started out as a hobby for all of us. When we were younger, it was something that we loved doing, and we're just fortunate that have worked hard for it to become our livelihood, whether it's playing, teaching, recording, you name it. If it's to do with drums and it's our living, it can still be a hobby, can't it? If we still love doing it, it just pays the bills.
Oh yeah. I mean, it's funny. I have two different responses to that. One is it's it's still a hobby for me. You know, Listening to a podcast with a drummer, uh, falling down the YouTube hole, with my jaw on the ground, watching these chops guys. It's like I would never play like that. I don't know how to play like that. I don't want to play like that. It's like, how do you guys get gigs playing like that? But it's still fun to watch, right?
Yeah.
So, but then the other response to that is like, other than the time when I was maybe a kid and sort of it was like, well, I'll be a musician or I'll be a baseball player, one or the other. By the time I got to high school, like it wasn't a hobby anymore. It was like, this is my goal. This is my mission in life. This is what I'm doing. And as a musician, not just as a drummer, but any kind of musician, particularly if you're getting into sort of like rock music and stuff like that, you have to turn off all the noise. You have to turn off all the people that are saying, "Oh, musician, oh, isn't that cute? What else do you do?" Um, I mean, to this day, I still, what do you do? Oh, I'm a musician. Oh, cool. Like, do you do anything else? Or, and it's like, well, no, I'm a professional musician, People still see it as this cute, quaint hobby, really.
Mm.
Um, which is why sometimes it's probably so hard to get paid.
Yeah.
But, I, from that high school age where I sort of determined this was it, like music is my thing, this is what I'm doing. It became less of a hobby and more of a drive, just an obsessive drive to like I'm going to make this happen.
Mm.
You almost want to manifest that career for yourself.
Mm. Yeah, that's cool. Yeah, I like the way you've talked about that, and totally agree with you. I've had it so many times when I say I've got a friend who's Italian, and apparently in Italy, from what he tells me, it's very rare for a drummer to only do that. So when I first met him, I said, "Oh, yeah, I'm a professional drummer, and I run a drum school." And he said, "Yeah, but what else do you do?" And I was like, "Nothing." He said, "No, you must have like a proper job." Like he wasn't being rude, but it's just like, I was like,
Sure.
"No, since 2004, I've run DrumWise, and that's it." He's like,
Yeah.
"No way!" Like, yeah, people find it weird, don't they?
Yeah, well, I think that's for a couple of different reasons. Is one, a lot of people have a tough time wrapping their head around that. Because I think they feel like it's a lottery ticket. Because when you say like, "Oh, I'm a professional musician," "Oh, what do you do?" "I play rock and roll." Like they automatically think like rock star, like Steven Tyler, and like I am no Steven Tyler. Like I'm just a guy who likes to play music with other people. I'm not even a Doobie Brother. I work for the Doobie Brothers, and I'm okay with that. And that's the other thing. The other thing I think why people have that reaction is because a lot of people are so far removed from what they wanted to do when they were a kid. And I'm not saying that's bad, and I'm not pointing fingers, and I'm not criticizing anybody. That's just kind of the way it is for some people. They're so far removed from that, whether they gave up on it or whether they got to a certain point and said, "This isn't for me, I'm going to do something else," or whether they just lost interest or what have you. That is so far in the rearview mirror for them. And the simple fact of the matter is that when I go back to work in a couple of weeks and I step into that rehearsal room and I play with these guys for the first time in a year and a half now, I'm going to feel like that 10-year-old kid that played along to those bootlegs in the basement.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
really am. And I think that gets lost for some people. And so they have a tough time comprehending, what do you mean that's all you do?
Mm. Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
And they don't know how hard work it is either.
Well, that's true. Yeah, everyone thinks it's just easy.
Yeah, because they assume that oh you play with the Doobie Brothers, you must have it made, you must be rich, you don't have to work a day in your life, blah blah blah. I'm like, are you kidding me? Do you know how many hours I've put into this and how much studying and sort of blood, sweat, and tears I've put into this to be able to go out and do that and play those songs and play them well? You almost want to kind of flip them the bird, so
And while we're on the curveball questions,
sure.
this is the most anticipated question of the whole of this DrumWise Meets series.
Okay.
And I know that the US guys have had very different answers to the sort of UK guys on this one.
Okay.
So, what's your favorite cookie?
My favorite cookie?
Yeah,
Like a snack cookie?
yeah,
Oh man. Oh, well, you guys have some fun stuff over there, right?
yeah.
Um, my favorite cookie is probably something that's homemade. Like if somebody baked like a chocolate chip cookie and you could taste the love that went into it. That's probably my answer. My typical American answer would just be an Oreo.
Okay.
Yeah.
And either of those things, the homemade chocolate chip cookie or the Oreo, are you a bit of a dunker with those?
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Yeah, I do like to dunk cookies.
Into what?
Usually just straight up milk. Lately, oat milk.
Yeah.
I'm trying to slim down a little bit. So I mean, I can't tell you the last time I had a cookie, but if it's there, I'll probably grab one.
There we go. See, I bet you didn't think I was going to be asking you about cookies today, did you? See?
So what's yours?
Oh, you can't ask me that. I don't know.
Come on, you've been torturing drummers for what, 100 episodes now with that question, and now you're not going to answer the question.
See, we have such a variety of obviously what we call biscuits,
Sure.
and there's just so many. But I think it would have to be something like a milk chocolate hobnob.
Okay.
It's just a good all rounder. It's good for dunking. Doesn't have to be dunked. It's just a sturdy biscuit.
Very nice. Well, I can tell you this: I'm a big fan of HP,
Mm,
and I'm also a big fan of the Arrow, the regular Arrow, not
okay.
the Mint. That's absolute crap.
Yeah, yeah.
And the Coffee Crisp, I'm a fan of as well.
Coffee crisp. What's that?
That might be more continental. That might be more of a Dutch thing. It's
Yeah.
like a chocolate. It's like wafers with sort of almost sort of coffee flavored like sort of cream, and then it's covered in chocolate.
Oh, right.
So
Ah, yeah. I'm not too familiar with that one, but it sounds good.
okay, gotcha.
So, my last question for you today. If you could give one bit of advice to your younger self, so when you first started drumming or when you first started taking drums seriously, what would that advice be?
That's a good question. I think the advice would be to absolutely follow your gut instinct. Listen to that voice in your head. Like, decide what it is you want out of music and then do that. Don't deviate from your plan. Don't listen to anybody else. I mean, listen, take in advice. Mentorship is a great thing. You can always learn something from somebody, even if it's what not to do. You can always learn something from someone. But ultimately, you have to satisfy that inner voice, that inner urge, that thing that compelled you to go down this road in the first place. Um, is to really listen to that voice, not take no for an answer, and just keep plowing forward with whatever it is you want to do. If you think you want to be um, in a band and you want that band to be successful, then follow that path. If you think you want to be a session guy and play on as many records as possible, then follow that path. If you just want to play drums when you want, with who you want, the kind of music you want, and you want to rely on something else for income, then do that. Like whatever it is and this goes for life in general, just not music. I think if I could go back and tell my younger self anything, and I tell my kids all the time, like, follow your gut instinct, because 99.9% of the time it's correct. You know?
Yeah, good stuff.
When you say, "Hey, let's do another shot," it's not correct.
So, Ed, thank you so much for spending your time with us here at DrumWise today. It's been an absolute pleasure talking with you.
Yeah, man, it's been my pleasure. Hopefully, one of these days we'll be in the same room together.